It is the Anfield Wrap. It's Neil Atkinson in Perth in Podwave Studios. Thank you very much to them for setting us up with this lovely setup. Loads of lovely red colour in the background. If you're watching it on the YouTube, hopefully you're enjoying that. Also, as ever, the Anfield Wrap on the Monday Free Show is in association with Peloton. They are the official digital fitness partner of Liverpool FC. And John, I'm actually looking forward to getting back on. I feel as though it's been 8 or 9 days of I mean, I don't want to sound like John Barnes and say sheer hell in Australia. We've had a fantastic time, but I would say possibly we've overindulged.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of cramming into flights as well and stuff like that. Like, I feel like I'm not having much leg room, so I'm looking forward to letting the legs go on the Peloton bike when it's all to get back. But yeah, you do miss it. It's a funny thing. But quite a few people have brought it up to me and have mentioned it, doing these live shows, saying they've got the bike and you know, getting involved in the community stuff that we got going as well. So that's been nice too.
Excellent. Have you got any plans? Have you put anything in the diary as to when you're next going to be on? Have you got it in the back of your mind? You're going to be around the office anytime this week and you're going to jump on just so they can join in?
No, yeah, I'll try and do the Friday live one. So a few of us have been trying to join the Friday, either 5 or 6, whatever best, and a group of us sort of go on the same class and then go, that was hard after in the Telegram group. So I might do a bit of that Friday 5 or 6 if people fancy it.
Excellent stuff. I've also got Craig Hannan and Josh Sexton with us for this show. There was someone on Blue Sky. I just sort of said, what would anyone want to talk about today? Because it's a bit of a funny one. It's an international break one, and also they don't even play next weekend. So next Monday, I think we'll look at the nick we think the players are in after the international break. But Lit Lipper on Blue Sky gave this little bit of inspiration that I'm going to build on, and it's the idea of each of the ramifications around the contract situation. So we're going to do, to start with, what if none of the 3 stay? And what would that look like, and what would that mean for Liverpool? Then we'll move on and do if only Van Dijk stays, because I think everyone feels he's the likeliest. Then we'll do Van Dijk and Salah stay, and then we'll do the ramifications, because there are ramifications if Van Dijk, Salah and Alexander-Arnold stay. It's not all positive because they're great footballers. There are other ramifications, but I'll stay with you, John, first and foremost. If none of the 3 stay, then it means that this fellow we've got in to be the Liverpool manager has ended up with the biggest sum of his career in year 2. But I'd argue there's almost ramifications for the perception of the club internally and externally, even if they're champions.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge summer, isn't it, if the 3 of them go? It's arguably a big summer anyway, because you're looking to build on the fact that hopefully they will be able to call themselves champions, and you want to be able to kick on and think, well, how do we make sure that we're going deeper in the other competitions next year? And so that's the aim if they all stay. But it also needs to be the aim anyway, and that's what they've all signed up for. And so it would be a huge summer. In terms of the perceptions of the club, I think that can change quite quickly in terms of who you get in. So I think if the 3 of them do go, it's going to be announced pretty quick. It'll be sort of 1st of June off they go, I would imagine, because, they'll be looking at sort of other clubs and stuff like that. So,
well, you think we'll know before the final game?
Yeah.
That's the way it's been in the past, not least for these 3 players as well. There will be, even though we hope there'll be a trophy getting given over, you'd think that they'd want to make a fuss of those players. I mean, it's what they've done every other season recently. Yeah,
you would have thought so. And so I think all eyes will be on Liverpool, not least from Liverpool supporters themselves, but also externally. Okay, well, what are you going to do? And I think they need to make 1 or 2 big signings pretty quickly to show everyone that they mean business next year, to show everyone internally, the other players as well. They'll be looking at it and thinking, well, they're 3 of our main fellas there. What are you sort of going to do? And so I think things can change quickly is what I'm saying. So although it might look wow sort of from the outside, if suddenly a couple of big names are coming in, then people are thinking, well, look, Liverpool are rebuilding, and they're rebuilding quick, and it is possible to get that kind of excitement and positive feeling sort of going again, but they would have to do it quickly.
And that would be the most important thing, Craig, in terms of getting everyone sort of feeling good for the summer if the 3 of them were to go. And I'm starting with this as what some people might say is the doomsday scenario, and we're going to move along, but it is just sort of worth pointing out it's very possible as we sit here that the 3 of them go, and I think that there would be a lot of disquiet among supporters if that was the case.
Yeah, massively. You're making me shudder as you talk about it, because it's not something that I've thought would happen. I have a feeling that at least 2 stay, but I think the ramifications are massive. I don't think it's as easy as, you bring in 2 signings and all feels close to well, because we're talking about the best centre-back in the world, and possibly the best centre-back ever. We're talking about one of our greatest ever attackers, if not our greatest ever attacker, and replacing serious numbers. And, what we've seen from this ownership or the football club or Michael Edwards or whoever it is that we want to say it is, what we've seen from them in the past is that, they're, or even in the recent past, it's more than likely going to be someone that they see as having the potential to be as good as Van Dijk quite quickly, but not straight away.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where it's not this simple thing where you go, oh, well, you lose these two and we bring these two builders in and then we all feel great about it, because like Van Dijk's been a massive safety blanket and even more than that. And Salah's been someone that every season you can hang your hat on, and I'm not even getting to Trent yet. So I think there would be disquiet. I think in terms of the perception of the club, unless these two builders within football, people are going, well, I can see what they're doing. There'll be conspiracy theories. There'll be people wondering why all of this is happening. There'll be an inquiry into why the club have allowed this to happen all at the one time. I think there would be serious disquiet.
There would be. I think it's worth saying. The other thing, part of it in a really simple sense, Josh, would be the competitive elements. Listen, I think that next season, this season, before the ball was kicked, I was saying on shows, I think that Liverpool have got as much chance as anyone else to win the league, i.e. as much chance as Arsenal or Man City. I think if 2 of the 3 stay, realistically, I think that's still true. I think Arsenal, Man City, Liverpool are the 3 most likely. You can argue the toss in a couple of ways, but Liverpool, we expect, will be champions. If all 3 of them go, I don't think Liverpool, it would be reasonable, I think, at that point to maybe wonder what Liverpool's status is around that sort of favouritism or otherwise for the league.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was reasonable before this season to expect there'd be a transition, and that was more so because, Jurgen Klopp was such a spiritual leader at Liverpool Football Club, wasn't he? He almost meant more than just being the manager, and that was where I was definitely sort of concerned that we were bringing in someone who, I think they were a little bit of pain to say at the end of last season, well, he's the head coach, he's not the manager, so he wasn't going to sort of be this holistic replacement, really. So I was almost allowing him ahead for a period of transition this season, and actually what you've seen is that Liverpool's squad's in a really good place, and I know that's been stretched and tested in recent weeks, and it's probably made some people start to question if it really is as strong as it is. But I mean, it's far stronger than anyone else's in the Premier League, is what I'd argue, and far stronger than most in Europe, really. Like, we've played a PSG side recently who you could argue have a strong squad, but I'd argue just are able to rest lads in the league because they're so far ahead of everyone else in their league. Liverpool are 12 points ahead of the second competition in their league, but every game, every week is so intense, isn't it? It's so fraught. I was almost wondering, with the benefit of hindsight, whether we should have rested more players against Southampton, and I think I'd mentioned that in the build-up to the game, but quietened on it after how much Southampton gave us a game in the first half. But that's a 9-point team in our league, giving us that good a game. So it's not really been a period of transition. It's been a season, where the squad has been so strong and has given us so much, in terms of success already, and we believe they're all going to lift the league title in a couple of weeks' time too. But what you guarantee if you lose all 3 of them is that next season definitely will be a period of transition, I think. And listen, I could be sat here, I don't know if that literally here in Perth
nice.
in 12 months' time. Yeah. But if I am literally sat here in Podwave Studios in Perth in 12 months' time, I'm probably going to be saying, I'm hopefully saying it wasn't much of a period of transition if all 3 of them are left. Hopefully I'm talking about, at least 2 of them of the 3 have stayed, because that is what it sets in sort of a chain of events for me, is that, you definitely have to go and replace Van Dijk, and like, as Craig said there, how do you do that? How do you replace one of the greatest centre-halves of all time? The one I've always been the most worried about really is Salah, because I just think you've seen throughout recent Premier League history how hard it is to go and replace like raw goal output. And I don't want to call Salah raw goal output in a sense, because he obviously brings so much more to this Liverpool side, but he's having his best scoring season of all time, so the idea of going out and replacing that becomes at least very expensive, if not particularly impossible. And then Trent is a lad who I still think is coming into his prime. Some people may argue they've been disappointed with spells with this season. I mentioned on stage in Perth last night that for me he's been our unsung hero, because I do think he's been massively a contributor to how creative this side's been allowed to be from sort of unorthodox areas, if that makes sense. Like, the creativity has obviously come through lads like Alexi McAllister and Dominic Szoboszlai, but that they're the orthodox areas where teams feel like they can stop at times. I think whenever Trent's on the pitch, this Liverpool team's been unstoppable. It's been proven so much this season in a positive sense, and I think we've felt it in his absence when he's not been there.
There is, with it, John, there's one positive. Obviously, it'd be a huge wage bill reset for the club. You recently did something really good with Dave Powell, and it is, I don't want to say something like Liverpool's wages are out of control, because I think they're very clearly not. We're in this process because Liverpool's wages aren't out of control. I think they do want to they've got an eye on it, but it's 370 million a year. It would, it's possible if they did extend all 3, it could go even over 400. But the point would be, I think there would then be massive pressure, for instance, on a Konate contract as well coming up. That pressure's not going to go anywhere. And I think one of my questions would become in that instance, how many players do you need to sign?
Yeah.
Because I think we already all think that we're looking at least 3 or 4, even if they were all to stay. If they all go, I think you're beginning to have a conversation about getting to 7.
Yeah, you can do quite easily because Richard Hughes there's a lot been said about Richard Hughes and what his sort of job is, and people say, his one job is to get these contracts sorted and he's not doing it. I don't think Richard Hughes thinks that's what his job is, to specifically sort this contract. I think
it's also too simple, that isn't it really?
Yeah,
So.
yeah. I think, but what his job is to get the best possible players out on the pitch. So give the head coach, if that's what you want to call him, the best possible squad for him to deliver what his aims are, which is obviously to win trophies, because this is Liverpool. So you could do that without Mo Salah, you could do that without Virgil van Dijk, you could do that without the freedom, and it is possible to build a better squad. It's just very, very difficult, and so that's what concerns me. And at the moment, they haven't got any track record really of sort of having done that for Liverpool. You know, if this was a case of, we could sit here and go, I remember 3 years ago when these players moved on and then we ended up sort of in a better place. We haven't got that. Richard Hughes has been in position less than a year now, and we haven't bought anyone so far under his stewardship, if you like. And although there's reasons for that, and you can talk about, last summer what he wants to do, and you can talk about January, that still sort of is factually the case. And so we there's not a lot to hang your hat on in terms of being able to say, okay, the 3 of them will go and they'll do this summer where they get sort of loads in, because if you take Salah for example, it is possible to rebuild the forward line and end up with something great in the past. Liverpool can win a league title without Mo Salah. We've done it 18 times,
and also other teams have won league titles whilst we've had Mo Salah without Mo Salah.
Exactly, and so it's possible to win the league without them, but we're just making it a lot harder for ourselves by getting rid of these sorts of top players. So that's what worries me more, is that from an emotional point of view, I don't want them to leave. So as a fan, I love Virgil van Dijk. He might be close to my favourite ever Liverpool player now. I love Mo Salah. We all do in sort of his output. Trent the same. We've had a really good relationship with him over the years in terms of the Anfield Wrap. I'll be sorry to see them go from an emotional point of view. We're trying to look at it from the outside, even from a kind of a cold-headed sort of point of view. It still is a massive thing that they want to try and do to if they're prepared to let the 3 of them go and then they want to be better, then you are talking, because you can't replace Mo Salah with one player and be better. I do not believe. But
what I think makes that difficult though, John, genuinely, is I actually think if you let Mo Salah go, it almost becomes harder to make a couple of sales you might want to make in attack, even if some offers come in. If you know what I mean, because you end up in a situation where you're already one known option down, if you see what I mean. So for instance, let's use Diaz as a good example. I think Diaz is always a really interesting player. There was a lot of chat about him last summer. This summer, first half of the season, a fair amount of output, played really well. But it might be that Liverpool might have that eye on, or someone might come in for him. He's constantly sort of linked away of all of our players loads. If you're going to rebuild the attack and you're going to rebuild it around sort of, we want to get a really good centre forward in, that player might not actually be Nunez, but you might think to yourself, there's nothing wrong with having Nunez be the backup if that's now the way you were playing. You sort of see what I mean? You can end up going down this loop of, because if you let Salah go and then you let another 2 attackers go, you're in a position where that's so much work to do in that one phase of the pitch.
But I think you've just got to do it, because I think if you are letting him go, they will have to try and see this as an opportunity. Okay, well, this is an opportunity to do. They can't just go and get another right winger and think we'll be better next season.
Absolutely.
I don't think they can do that. They certainly can't do it at centre half. That is absolutely impossible. So if Virgil goes, it's okay, well, who are we getting? We need 2 centre halves then, and then you're looking to have him with Konate, and then you say, okay, well, we haven't got quite a Virgil, but we think we've got a guy who could be the next Virgil, and also we've got our third choice, we've made that better as well. So it's looking at each position and how you strengthen it, and it is possible, but it's really, really hard. And like you say, it's not just a case of replacing them like for like, because the like for likes aren't there. So you need to start, they need to move Nunez out, for example, and get an amazing sort of number 9 in. And then if your right winger's not quite as good as Salah, but you've jumped up in the other position, then it is possible to be better.
But you do need cover, is what I'm saying as well.
Yeah, but you've got 2 players there. You've got Jota and Nunez.
Okay.
So I'm talking about you selling one and then improving on the other. And so it's how you end up overall. And like I said, it is possible to end up overall. I'm just not sure they've got it in them.
I thought it's exceptionally hard.
We're talking about the idea of transition here, and transitions moving from one state or place to the other, and there's a process in that. And my worry about all of this is Liverpool end up league champions, and and they do the thing that they've only done twice in my lifetime if they manage it this season, and then this isn't transition because we're doing it all at once. This is starting again to me. If you're talking about signing 6 or 7 new players here, and you're removing a captain and you're removing 2 players from a leadership group, 3 players from leadership, the vice captain as well, you're saying to the manager, thanks very much for what you've got here and what you've done here. Now we go again, we start again, and that's a massive job that you're putting on him.
And by the way, I think your thing breeds discontent as well, Neil, because I think we've seen so often in the past that the thing that the people who love the transfers basically on social media want is not the a new signing thing. We don't just want repurposing of players for the better of the overall team. We want to see that if for example a 25 goal a season striker leaves, that Liverpool show the ambition to go and find who's the fella who's a 30 goal a season striker. Because let's be brutally honest about it, Luis Diaz isn't even close to a 20 goal a season forward. Darwin Núñez is not close to a 20 goal a season forward. Diogo Jota doesn't stay on the pitch enough, and I would argue is probably fading a bit from even being remotely close to a 20 goal season striker.
But I think my point here is that what you've therefore argued in this scenario where Salah goes is that we're moving forward the forward line on.
Yeah, and that's
in one summer, and that is that. So I take John's point of you want to get better in all areas, but you end up you can either do it one or two ways. Obviously there's degrees and everything.
Yeah.
And my point is more, you can either end up doing what John's arguing, which is you go right, the whole department gets renovated, bang, or alternatively you end up in a situation where the manager himself might be thinking to himself, well, a couple of lads who know what they do.
Yeah, I think they keep the left hand side. I think he's got to look at it and think Gakpo and Diaz. Regardless of if that's exactly sort of who he wants, that I'll do another year with them. So you do have to be sort of realistic in terms of what you kind of achieve. But I think they do need to find a way to, if you look at the forward line as a whole and marks out of 10 for sort of all of them, you need to end up with an average higher, and they need to try and do that. And you're getting rid of a 10. And you're getting rid of a 10 as a back.
Yeah. You're getting rid of the one that when we went into this season, I was looking at the players and I was going, right, the 6 that we've got in attack, there's question marks around all of them except Salah, but there's a question mark around Salah with because of the contract. And then you lose Salah, and so we go into a new season where there's question marks around either the new signings that they bring in. There's still question marks around the left-hand side that we're talking about not replacing because we've got rid of the best player in the world in his position in the forward line. This is the bit that my only sort of the one time in my life that Liverpool have been successful over a sustained period, which is under Jurgen Klopp. It felt as if we were building something. What did I say?
Jurgen Klopp.
Jesus Christ. It's been a long 10 days.
Don't edit that out, Perth. I want that kept in at all costs.
We keep everything in. Under Jurgen you were constantly building towards something. You could see where even when they fell short, you could see, well, we added this player and there's a transformer here and there's transformer. My only worry around all of this is we're starting again, and I start to wonder whether the reason why Edwards has come in is because he almost is excited by the prospect of starting a game with Liverpool, and that's a big worry for me.
One of my things is always constantly not want to be an art project.
I was just going to say, I think they need to be wary that all those different positions are going to breed so much discontent. So I'm talking about the whole a new signing thing there. I can see that a mile off if even if just one of these stays, and I know we're going to come on to talk about that scenario, but even if it's 2 that do go, 2 that do stay, whatever, they're leaving themselves with such a big job to do that people are naturally going to ask questions, and I think there'll be some people who I think it's going to be a bit of a test of their what they actually want, because the people who've been crying out for transfers for years. So if Richard Hughes and Michael Edwards suddenly go, well, here's all the transfers you could ever have dreamed of, then there's going to be a lot of us who probably want Liverpool to just have a bigger and better squad, whether it's through transfers, whether it's through lads through the academy coming up, whether it's through the just repurposing of talent from within. We're going to be the ones who are sat going, you still need to prove this to us, by the way, because as Craig says, you're going from a squad where I've got some question marks about the current squad. It's not very many because we're 12 points clear at the top of the Premier League, so you suddenly go from having not very many question marks to now there's a question mark in basically every position across the pitch. And actually it's less than question marks for some of them. I mentioned there, if we do keep hold of Darwin Núñez in the summer and there's an offer from Saudi on the table for 60 million, I don't imagine those 2 scenarios actually marry up. I think if there's an offer for 60 million, he leaves, but then suddenly we're going, we couldn't afford Alexander Isak, then people are going to be going, well, why the fuck didn't you sell Darwin Núñez for 60 million then? Because you can't turn around and go, we couldn't afford that player even though there was offers on the table for, let's say it's Diaz, probably a better example. If there's an offer for 50 million on the table for Diaz from Barcelona, Barcelona and they're going, yeah, we couldn't afford Ishak, people would be going, well, we know Diaz isn't a 20-goal-a-season striker. You've just lost a fella who scores you 25 goals a season. Why have we not gone and got the next best thing that we all can see in the Premier League? The lad who scored, 21 as it stands this season, 21 last season. Like, he seems like the best player you can go and get. So don't turn around and tell me, who, as I say, is not one of the ones who wants all the transfers through the door necessarily, but then definitely don't tell the lads who want all the transfers through the door that the reason you couldn't afford him is because you didn't accept it for the lad who scores 8 goals a season.
Right, moving along. Only Van Dijk stays, John. It would leave, I think we've just been touching on it here anyway, but it would leave a huge creative deficit in terms of what Salah brings, but also what Trent has brought to the club across 5 or 6 seasons, the unorthodoxy as well, as Josh talked about. It would allow you, if you wanted to do this sort of dynamic restructure, to do it with at least a level of certainty. You've still got Virgil van Dijk at the back in there as well. But I think it almost then offers you another couple of tactical questions. I think it's interesting, the manager, he's built 2 teams almost in a way at finals because they have a really big chain of players over there in the Eredivisie. But he's also gone out of his way to say the Eredivisie and the Premier League are 2 massively different challenges. He's been saying that all the way through. I think you end up in a situation, for instance, that a lot of why Dominic Szoboszlai's worked brilliantly this season and why we're happy with so much of what he's ended up bringing to the table is because we understand he's creating a platform, especially for Salah, to go and be Salah. I think, if you did have to remodel the attack, I don't think it's just the idea of who's playing in the front 3. I think it's a bit on the shape. I think it has ramifications for what you're asking from midfielders. I think if you haven't got that dynamic force from right back that we've seen down the years, I do think it isn't quite as simple as we just need to go and get a couple of really good attackers, because you might just need a brilliant number 10 before you go anywhere else.
And that's might be what the manager wants to go. It will be really interesting, that scenario, to see how they approach it from an attacking point of view, because like you say, Neil, they'd almost try and have to find a new way to attack and look at sort of, how they want to build attacks and how they want to go, because they've had this dynamic right-hand side for sort of so long that, and it's been such an option, hasn't it, to have, especially when Trent's playing, just to have boom that ball and Salah's over the top and he's in to either have a shot or get an assist. And when you remove that,
or even the switch going the other way, you know what I mean? Because it's such, we act like it's just normal. How with Trent, it is, when he does it, it just unleashes it. It creates so much space for us.
Yeah. So if Virgil stays, then you get continuity in some ways, and I think that's in really important ways. Don't get me wrong. And so your captain's still there. It's a connection to the recent past in terms of winning. When I think it is if possible good to have some of those lads around who won a lot, who were able to sort of, because I mean the way football clubs, how you get success over a sustained period is through culture and is through passing values sort of down, and it's from people joining the football club and very quickly getting an idea of what the club is about and what is sort of expected of them and standards that are hit, and keeping Virgil, I think if the other 2 go, sort of really important, for that really. And obviously there'll be a couple of others, the likes of Robertson, who I expect still to be around, sort of in some way. Alisson Becker, of course, the keeper, but them 2 are rumored to be sort of, maybe on the way out a little bit as well. So I think Virgil staying is vital for keeping, some continuity together in terms of values, but in terms of style of play, it will be sort of completely different, really. And the manager might see that as a bit of an opportunity again, and he might see that, okay, I've been making some decisions around how we've played. I think he is quite a pragmatic manager, and I think he might say, okay, we've made some decisions around sort of how we've played based on this and how people have fitted into that. But how do we want to kick on looking forward? It is going to be really interesting, and it might take a little bit of time, and that's where I think a couple of years ago, we had a whole new midfield, and it actually worked sort of really well, partly because it went from having no legs to having sort of plenty, and that was sort of fine. But they also had the forwards as the reference point, if you like. We won't necessarily have that. If we're all talking about 2 new starting forwards, you'd probably want, if Salah was to go, I think, to use my labour this point of being better overall. I think you need 2 starting forwards if Salah goes, and then you can use either Diaz or Gakpo down the left-hand side, whoever's, in the best sort of form or nick at that time. But then your midfield need to wait almost to play for sort of from that, really, and it might take a little bit of time.
But it's much easier for fans to accept that after a season that had gone so badly with the midfield, where you see all of the errors, you see all the problems, and you see all the fixes that are needed. So you're able to look at all these players that are coming in midfield and go, yeah, no, I understand that this needs it needed a big change, and they made a big decision, and it works out. You know, when it's the case, if you're watching someone break records, you know, on a weekly basis at the minute, it feels like you're watching them, you know, light up the Premier League, and it's not just goals, it's assists. It's that's a big move to make.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like you basically in that scenario, like Salah has been so good this season. Like he's been so important for Liverpool, hasn't he? And like I mentioned that like raw output thing with goals before. Like I just want to build on that a little bit more, because like I think you've seen from like, you know, United especially in recent years. And listen, we've all laughed at like scattergun approaches to transfers. United and Chelsea have obviously been two of the worst for the scattergun approaches to transfers. Like they've spent so much on attacking talent and not been able to find that one player who gets you loads of goals. And I got the sense that, I think it was Mo asked a lot the question earlier this season about that sort of like almost over-reliance on Salah. I got the like sort of impression from Slot that he didn't really want them to be over-reliant on one player, but also being able to have that one player who, like, when a game's not necessarily going your way, and we've seen, by the way, in recent times that, you know, you can go through periods, not just periods in games, periods over weeks, months, where everyone else is out of form in the front line. I think, you know, it was Adam Mealy who made the point on a show with me a couple of weeks ago, which was a brilliant point, really, that you basically have like almost two different directions, and it's a little bit of making something black and white that's actually way more nuanced, but just sort of bear with me and Adam for this one. You know, you've almost got the mercurial genius in Mo Salah, who does bring you all those things, but also when you're struggling in periods of games, he just finds a way to find a way, basically, whether it's, you know, he doesn't necessarily win a penalty for himself, but, you know, scoring a penalty is, as we've seen in recent times from Liverpool, is not necessarily just a given. Mo Salah makes it look like it's a given now. He's got that level of genius to him. You've got Darwin Núñez, who is mercurial, and Adam accidentally left out the genius. I'm going to deliberately leave out the genius. He's just mercurial. He's pretty robust in a way, Darwin. Like, he doesn't get many injury issues, but, you know, when he's on the pitch, he's going to burn your head out in some way. There's, you know, we talked about the question marks. It's massive, the biggest of all the question marks over Darwin Núñez. And then with the other lads, what you've got is, I wouldn't argue genius or mercurial, really. Maybe it's a little bit harsh on Diaz, but really what they are is robust. So suddenly you've gone from having, you know, the mercurial genius in world football, I'd argue, because Kylian Mbappe has had a, you know, a season where he's sort of just adjusting to life at Real Madrid. You've got the mercurial genius in world football, and you're basically going to say, yeah, we're happy to move him on to just have a load of lads who are robust. Like, you're going to have to go out and find that other mercurial genius. I think that lad who, you know, when a game isn't going your way, when suddenly all the robust lads who were scoring at the start of the season, and that was all going brilliantly, don't all score for 8 games in a row. You're going to need to go and find the fella who you're going to be able to lean on in that moment where, you know, it's 1-0, you're 1-0 down Southampton after the first half. Who's the fella who's going to come and get us 2 goals here to make sure it ends 3-1?
Or do both. You know, if you're selling Núñez, then you still do both, because, you know, we signed Chiesa last season. We had 3 transfer windows, 1 player signed.
I would argue is probably mercurial, by the way, Chiesa. Like, he's not the
yeah, but you know what I mean. If you're moving Núñez on, you're able to make the money on that. Then you bring someone else in. If it is an Isak or whatever, we should be able to do both.
I think with it, John, I think it's Craig makes the point before about the sort of the creativity. When you watch Liverpool attack, it is get the ball to Salah. There's times they actually do me head in a little bit with it, where it's like almost like if they're on a bit of a quick counter or they've won it back quite fast. It's almost like we're just going to get it to Salah, and then Salah's going to decide the next thing. Now, there's a flip side to this, which it might be that Cody Gakpo's going home at night saying, "I wish I was that fella. I wish they went, will you run the attack a bit more? If in doubt, get it to Cody and he'll make the next decision." There's every chance that's the case, and maybe that's why he's shone to the extent he has in the League Cup. Gakpo is that he gets to be that player. So there is a chance that someone stands up, but this is what you mean and what I mean about remodelling the whole thing. As I say, I think it throws Szoboszlai's position and role and demands open a little bit more as well. But then Szoboszlai might think, if I didn't have to do everyone else's running, that'd be brilliant. So, you know, it's worth remembering the footballers themselves have got agency in this. One of them could just grab the manager's attention.
Yeah, listen, you know, whenever in any organisation, you know, a big personality goes, it's an opportunity for others to step up, and I'm sure there will be plenty who see that, but there's also pressure around that as well. There's pressure for whoever's playing, there's pressure for certainly whoever comes in and is seen as the replacement, rightly or wrongly, because someone's got to stay there. And also, Mo Salah doesn't stop existing. Yep. So if we get to September and we're struggling for goals and he's got 10 wherever he is, you know, wherever he's playing, then that adds pressure as well, and people are going like, what are you doing letting him go? Wherever he starts next season, he's going to start with a bang, and listen, that should,
he's going to Mo Salah his head off if he doesn't stay at Liverpool.
Yeah, wherever he goes, he's going to sort of start with a bang, and also he he might kick up a bit of a fuss when he leaves. Do you know what I mean? Like, there might not be this like lovely like Outarad and stuff like that. I'm sure it'll be nice in terms of the fans, but he might have a few things to say as well, which might put them pressure on. I don't think it's necessarily the case that he's gonna do just oh yeah, thanks a lot for the years. I think there might be a bit of a
nice one to Richie to use.
Yeah. I think there might be a little bit of a I wanted to stay. I don't really understand why I'm sort of going.
A wild CNN interview from left field.
Exactly. So there might be a little bit of that, which he's within his rights to do. It's freedom of speech, I suppose, but like he doesn't have to think about what's best for the next Liverpool forwards. And so I think that there might a little bit of pressure will build in that way. So we've got to sort of bear in mind that for all three of the players who might go, they're not going to stop playing football, and they'll probably do really well wherever we go next.
I think the scenario that everyone thinks is most likely, John, is currently, not everyone, a majority of people feel is most likely, is that Salah and Van Dijk do find a way to stay in conjunction with the club, and Trent Alexander-Arnold goes. I think there'll be an emotional thing there, and I very much do not think that Trent will kick up a fuss in a Mo Salah way. Let's be crystal clear. I'd be stunned if that was the case. I just feel as though, if that does happen, and I've been thinking a lot, not least because of what Josh has been saying when we've been doing these live shows, the idea of what is such a unique talent in football moving on, I just think it is ultimately the word I'm almost just going to use is it would just feel so deeply like a shame. It'd throw open, you said before about the emotional, I think it throws open, he would need to be replaced. And I don't think Liverpool are into signing backup players. So that throws open a question as well around Bradley and what the thoughts are there. But I just sort of feel as though at the minute, I think it's interesting this season where on the whole, when we've needed a bit of a get out of jail free card, I feel Trent's been that. He's unleashed against Newcastle. He sets up Nunez for against Brentford. He does all the stuff he does really consistently. I thought it last season as well before he got the injury at Arsenal. It felt a bit like something's not going right. So suddenly there's loads of Trent in the match and he's just going to sort of try to fix it.
We were better with him on the pitch against PSG, which is no surprise to me.
And I think that, very much so at Anfield, 100%. I feel as though he is the man for the big occasion or the big moment when you're called on. And part of that is because he does it from right back, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, he's another way to win a football game, and he's a way to win a football game that most clubs haven't got. And that's why there is the interest from Real Madrid, one of the biggest clubs in the world, to sort of take him because they know sort of how rare those players are. And also the fact that, you can never have too many ways to win because, like you say, if you're not playing well, if it's not sort of, going right, then you can imagine a 10 out of 10 performance from Liverpool and Trent's great in it. And you can also imagine a 5 out of 10 performance from Liverpool that they managed to win because Trent does something, boss. And that sort of has been a real asset is, I think we forget just how crazy it is for both fullbacks, by the way, the numbers that they've posted in terms of assists and stuff like that. It's just absolutely mind-blowing what they've been able to do in terms of this creativity. And it keeps teams guessing. And the worry without him is that you become a little bit more predictable. And I think predictable can be fine if it's going well. And I think, if you've got sort of a new style of play that we've talked about and you're attacking and it's working well, Man City in many ways at the top were predictable, but teams still couldn't stop them. But when we've seen recently where it sort of stops working, they're all looking around, they'll love the Trent this season, Man City, because he would have got them out of a couple of holes and stuff like that. And so
Someone just keeps the show on the road when other things aren't working.
Yeah, exactly. So he will be really missed, from a footballing point of view, without even sort of getting into the other stuff. But I think it is possible to sort of kick on without him, I would say. And I think if you were to offer me this scenario right now, I'd take it because I could see a way that they can improve, and I can also half see the argument that they're making around his wages and versus his value to the team and. It all depends on what you want from a right back, really, and I think Slot could maybe see someone doing a bit more traditional right back and working out well for him in terms of how he wants to play. And so I don't think it's as cut as dried this one as maybe like we'll just sort of pay him what he wants, because there is knock-on effects, for that really, especially when you've got Virgil and Salah, want to sort of big money. So it's a tricky one. Obviously the problem is that we're not going to get any fee for him whatsoever, so you're not making a decision on moving on from a particular position of strength, and you've got the side where it just feels like if he's a Boss Scouts player that he should play for Liverpool, but I think that about all of them, to be honest with you, whatever the sort of they're knocking about. But we will miss him, and people who say we won't, I think might change their mind a couple of times next season in unexpected games. Yeah,
I think part of it, Craig, is I think it will buy the new regime a little bit of time. also, though, the flip side of it is, if the two stay, because we're talking there, John's just talked about Trent, but if the two stay, let's be clear, they're not going to stay on less money than they're currently on. They're possibly negotiating to get more, whether it's in bonuses or whatever else. So it defers any sort of wage realignment from a Liverpool point of view. Salah and Van Dijk are still, going to be knocking around. They're still possibly thinking about buying 3 defenders this weekend. This weekend, Christ, like me on a night out. Buying 3 defenders in the window, possibly. I think it would mean, though, that they'd need to be doing the succession planning for Salah and Van Dijk across the next 2 seasons. And it would be, I think that would then become Richard Hughes' job, is how you got the best possible Liverpool kicking off what would then be, as mad as this sounds, to think that far ahead. But what John said before, this is Richard Hughes' job. How are we getting the best possible Liverpool kicking off the 27-28 season? That's what they'd start to think about if the other 2 stayed for 2 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice position to be in if you're able to buy time with re-signing the best centre-back in the world and the best attacker in the world, isn't it? And I think this is the one that we all think might happen, I think if you ask the fan base what's likely to happen, I agree with John what he just said on the Trent thing. Like, I'm obviously a massive Bradley advocate. There's a little bit more pressure on him if Trent leaves next season. I do think they'd need to bring in a right back that competes with him. But the thing I've loved most about this season with the 2 right backs is they're very much different. They're very different players, and so there's games where you're able to take Trent off where it's not quite been happening, and then Bradley makes the run inside, and then that opens up a little bit of room for Salah, and then suddenly Bradley's in to make assist. You can see how it feels different, and
you could see if both were fit and flying, that the Liverpool manager would feel in great shape to be able to do this. Yeah,
brilliant, and so it would be a shame in that case. I just think in general it will be a massive shame. I know what John's saying about the Scouse player. Like, I like the idea of Liverpool having the best player from its own city playing for it. He feels like he is and they bandy this word around a lot, but generational talent. It just would feel like a great shame. And I'm obviously biased. We all are. We're Liverpool fans. I love what Jimmy Carragher said on Sky, where he said, when he was a Liverpool player, he wins the European Cup, and then his only thought was to win the European Cup again with Liverpool. And I know they're very different players. Trent has these opportunities that maybe Jimmy Carragher didn't. I'm not comparing the two in any way in that shape or form, but it'll hurt a little bit, to be honest. And I can understand all of the reasons why, the lovely weather, the going to Madrid, the new challenge, playing with his mate, the opportunities to win European Cups, but it'd be a time when Liverpool are building towards something special, and that's the bit that will massively hurt for me. But yes, I understand the buying more time. I think that some of the players that you're talking about will have to be bought this summer. The player that eventually does become Van Dijk's replacement, the player that does become Salah's replacement, and I don't mean replacement on the right wing. They might look and go, well, Isak is actually, exactly. Isak becomes the fulcrum. He becomes the vocal point. That'll have to happen now so that we don't get ourselves into this mess again.
Well, there's an AFCON as well next year, and so we need to be thinking about, well, who's carrying the torch.
The timing of it's different as well. Yeah. It spans the Christmas period. In the past, there's been a bit of January, and sometimes that can be quite FA Cup and League Cup heavy. Although these days, I think it's because the Champions League's moved. They want those players back to be able to play the Champions League games. So it starts 21st of December, but then they get a week with the players beforehand.
Yeah.
So effectively, in what is the busiest time for England? And we need to remember, I think, in this job.
I was going to say, if it starts on the 21st of December, he's missing like 8 games before January even hits.
But I think this is, let's be clear about this. English football are the weirdos. Everywhere else gets a winter break and gets time off. So they're catering for everyone else. English football supporters, Liverpool football supporters will all be going, what the fuck, this is massively inconvenient. But the truth of it is, for everyone else, this is almost the best solution, if you see what I mean, and you're absolutely spot on with that. Josh, just on this scenario, I think it gives them more agency to restructure the attack with sales, without it being John's nuclear bomb approach, almost with it. I think it does allow them to be a bit more choosy in terms of who they sell, wait for their offer, I think, a little bit more, no matter what direction they go in. But I think that it will give them that ability to plan that, and even if that took 2 summers to end up with the replacement point that Craig talks about, they can treat it more like a chessboard, unlike John's scenario, which is a bit like a big jigsaw puzzle which someone's just thrown at your face.
Yeah, well, like, it's one of the things we have praised, not necessarily this regime, but it might have been the sort of back end of the Michael Edwards into Julian Ward time was their ability to contingency plan, where Sadio Mane leaves and Luis Diaz is already in the door. I can't remember who Cody Gakpo and Darwin Núñez come in to replace in the end. Probably Firmino, I guess, in terms of that sort of that sort of area of the pitch, if you will. But basically what Liverpool are doing around that time is bringing in the fella before the fella they are anticipating leaves. And I wonder if that's where they have just been a little bit caught sort of cold with these contracts, in the way that you've seen it go with Jurgen leaving it in recent years, and all the reasons that we believe the contracts have got to this point now is have almost not allowed themselves a contingency plan, because either they've been too confident that they all get done, and listen, I hope that confidence is guided rather than misguided. But also possibly just because they've just been caught a little bit cold by all of it, where we've mentioned the new transfer regime coming in and things like that. So it's where I hope that they've been doing the contingency planning in the background now to ensure that as you mentioned there, if they do the two, they'll bought themselves a bit of time to restructure the forward line there. The one thing they won't have bought themselves time to do is replace Trent Alexander-Arnold, and I want to go back to that sort of mercurial genius point I made before, because you've referenced that I've sort of said in a couple of these shows on the tour now that it's the unorthodox creativity that I think Trent brings, like being that much of a unicorn of a footballer. I think what I've noticed this season the most that he allows you to do without getting all sort of review about the whole thing is like you've got that ability to spray the 70-yard pass that we've all talked about, but also if a team is sitting deep, he's got the ability to pick a pass to the front of the box, and I think that's where Dominic Szoboszlai will feel so unlocked by games that Trent Alexander-Arnold is a part of this season. Even Alexi McAllister I think would feel he's unlocked so much by Trent Alexander-Arnold's presence.
We'd have been well best in the League Cup final. Last 15 minutes of Trent was on the pitch.
100,
well better.
100%. I think there's genuinely a chance that there's a goal in that PSG game for Liverpool. Trent Alexander-Arnold still on the pitch, and obviously that's it's all if buts and maybes now. It's sort of for the birds, really, isn't it? But I could make an argument better with any kind of proper right back on the pitch in the League Cup final, really, if Conor Bradley was fit too. So yeah, we could probably sit there here and do that forever. But what Trent has got is the ability where if it's a Nottingham Forest who've been way more confident in their defending this season, want to compact the pitch more in the midfield, Trent can spray a ball in behind as long as Luis Diaz is pushing on. He can actually, if they're sitting 10 yards deeper, ping one right into the back post and make sure they have to drop that little bit deeper. But then he's also got the variation to be able to go to the edge of the box as well. And that's the thing I think you'll miss the most, is that I don't want it to sound like a lazy comparison, but Conor Bradley for me is very Andy Robertson, where he's all action. He can be all things to all men at times. He doesn't have those attributes that Trent has, and that's where I think like him being a unicorn helps you so much. So I'd be dead interested to see like if he was to be the one who moves on, and as everyone said, I think most people would agree that's the most likely scenario now is that he probably does move on. I'd be interested to see how they look to replace that creativity, because I don't believe for a second there's a lad they can just go and buy it right back and be like, oh, it's fine, we got him now. He's going to be the new Trent Alexander-Arnold. It probably just has to come from somewhere else, whether they go and find a centre half who's 18 and they've noticed his passing range is brilliant, or maybe it is a right winger they go and get, and
maybe it's a left back and you remodel in that way.
Exactly, like they're going to have to find some way to get creative themselves with that, really. And like I mentioned before, there's so many different directions all this discontent can come from. I just hope that they're aware how many different directions the discontent can come from, really, because I think the Trent scenario is probably the one where the least discontent comes in a general sense. But like for someone like me and like us in the room who love Trent Alexander-Arnold, the minute he's conspicuous in his absence for Liverpool, we're all going to be sat there going, miss Trent,
Missed him in that one massively. All right, John, before we went away, he's not done it whilst we're here, spoke to Chris Chibnall on his book Death at the White Hart. Here's that.
It is John Gibbons from the Anfield Wrap, and I'm delighted to be joined in our studio this morning by Chris Chibnall, who's the creator of Broadchurch, former writer and director of Doctor Who, and now the author of Death at the White Hart, and a huge Liverpool supporter. So, Chris, thanks so much for coming to see us at the Anfield Wrap. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for asking. I'm really pleased to be here as a subscriber. I feel like I'm getting the money's worth.
Very important. We will check his app on the way out. Don't worry about that.
You can see what I've downloaded.
We're here mainly to talk about your book, which is out on the 27th of March. But I do want to talk a little bit about your life and work first, if you don't mind, and particularly how you've managed to intertwine that with Liverpool Football Club, because you are a big Liverpool fan. And so, I mean, first of all, how did that come about? Why are you a Liverpool fan, and how important has it been to you throughout your life?
I've come to it late, so so my relationship to football happened later in my life. When I was a kid, we moved about a lot. So before I was 11, we'd moved like 3 times. So we lived in like the Midlands. And then, but when I was 12, we moved to Formby, and not quite the form it is now. There was no
less footballers.
There was no footballers. The only famous guy there was the lead singer of Swinging Blue Jeans, Ray Ennis. He was like the Formby celebrity in 1982, and I think he's still touring. So I was there. So my teenage years were on Merseyside, and every weekend I would be coming into the city. That's kind of where my relationship with Liverpool as a city came. I wasn't really into football as a kid so much. And then because I was more into drama, I was in that divide of the drama lads and the football lads. And then I was really into Doctor Who. I was like a fan of that. I was that guy. And so then it became... my relationship to football happened kind of a bit through university, and then after uni, I got a job at Sky. This is a really long story.
No,
I don't know if you've got time.
No, fine.
But after uni, I got a job at Sky erasing tapes, and this was like 1991, and I was like bulk erasing tapes for them as a summer job because it was like near where I was living there, and it was the summer they got the Premier League.
Yeah,
and what I'd been doing also is they bought a load of they'd merged with BSB, and they had a pile of Italian football tapes which they couldn't get onto their system with illegible handwriting, and I spent the summer in a cold vault transcribing these tapes onto a computer system. And then they were like, during that summer they said, we've just got Premier League. We haven't got any systems for the Premier League. Do you want to come and be the tape archivist, the footy librarian for this from the season? And so there was only like 4 people working around anything. And so at this job, which just like dropped me into the middle of everything football for those first couple of years, and just transcribing every match of the first Premier League season onto a computer of like the shots that were in the shows.
It must have been such an interesting time because, like, I don't know if people realise, I was quite young at the time, but I do remember they basically they bought football on a bit of a whim and then got it, and then they were like, panic stations, we're going to have to... So it was basically building everything from scratch.
It was exactly that, and I was like the tiniest cog at the bottom of the pile, John. It was like, they were like, who's that guy who's been sitting in that vault all summer because he looks like he can type.
You can do something.
It was like, okay, sit there, and they created a whole system. It had never been done before, so everything was done on like paper match logs of like if there was a close-up of Fergie, it was like they did all that. And so they created this bespoke system just so they could then do those like music pieces, which are now, we take for granted in coverage, but they weren't really doing them before then because they couldn't get all the shots to put it all together. So I was there during that, and you're right, it was like a warehouse. There weren't many people working there. They didn't have, and nobody really knew each other. It was really mad, and there was I was in the same office as like Richard Keys and Andy Gray and Jeff Shreves and all these people, thinking, what am I doing here? I've done a drama degree, and I'm but I just got really into, and it was just to your point. Then they didn't have anybody, and then as I really got into, and then I got into in the second season, they would just have nobody. So they were like, can you come and floor manage Super Sunday and can you go and take George Best out of his car at Old Trafford and just do a fitness check on him and then do this thing? And I was like, so I had a load of that, and I was like out on outside broadcast, but it wasn't really what I wanted to do. Anyway, this is the long complicated story of my history of football, but I just it connected with me in a way it hadn't done when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And then, but I think and then I've had other things through my career. Like I ended up at a theatre company when I graduated doing. This guy who ran it. They'd done a theatre show with George Best and Rodney Marsh, where they were doing like an after dinner sleeping through theatres, and this bloke who was running this company then did wanted to do a show with Tommy Docherty and Malcolm Allison, and he was like, we're going to do that, we're going to do it like one night everywhere around the country, and he said, I'll host it and you can stage manage it. And we went off doing that, and then he couldn't be there on the first night, so he was like, you go on and host it. So I had to go on stage with these two guys and do a 20-night tour around the UK.
Wow.
Looking after them and sharing this thing. I was like 24 around all these venues, and and just doing that and providing them with champagne after the show and all this kind of stuff. But I think the big thing that kind of connected, I'd been away from Merseyside for a long time, and then having kids and having my kids. So my wife's dad is from Birkenhead. My family are all red. My sister and her husband and all that kind of stuff. And actually having kids, I've got to take you to Liverpool really early on, and coming back after probably 20, 25 years, in a different way. I suddenly realised this was the play, because I've moved about so much in my life, and that this was the place I felt. I don't know if it feels home, because it's there's Formby and there's Liverpool, and they're not the same thing, as we know. But just the first trip I bought my little Matt, who's now 21 and was at the match. I brought him back, and bringing him round the city, I was like, oh, this is the place that formed me.
Yeah.
From 12 to 18, I was in here every weekend, and then I and took him to the match, and first match it was the Norwich match with Suarez, and then the second one was Arsenal, and it was he saw 5-1. He saw a 5-0 and a 5-1.
It's funny enough, we did some shows on that last night, so it's my favourite season, and we did 13-14, and we did that episode 4 last night, and it was the Arsenal 5-1.
Okay, so those were his.
So it's fresh in my mind.
Those were his 2 first matches.
I mean,
at age 8.
I don't know, I think I was 30 around that time. As a 30-year-old, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Imagine being an 8-year-old watching a Liverpool 5 Arsenal 1 and the 4-0 up after 20 minutes and all of that. He must have lost his mind.
And it's so it's really, it was exactly that. And we were right at the back of the Anfield Road, at the top for the Norwich, and at the back of the old main stand for the, and it just, and I'm the dad that goes, it's not always like this. After the first match, I'm like, you won't see 5 goals ever again. The second one, he goes, oh, all right, okay. And then we've managed to get some tickets and some season tickets, and we've been coming ever since. And so for me, it's absolutely connected me back to my childhood. It's made me understand myself. This has turned into therapy, John. I wasn't really expecting it. But it's connected me back into my childhood. But it's really given me the connection with my kids from going to the match, because we live in Dorset, so I live a mile from where we filmed Broadchurch, and doing that travel to every match with my kids during their childhood, which is a 5-hour drive, and it's on the train and whatever, has been that connection point. That and the matches have just completely defined the last since then, 11 years, and that's been pretty hard to schedule with work and everything. but it's I know you've got a young son, haven't you? So it's that time at the match, that time traveling, that time afterwards. And then, but connecting them to the city and sort of showing them the city, which is very different from when I used to come in every weekend, and has really, it's really, for me, it's hard to explain. This has got very therapy, but because I moved about a lot, it's hard to know where you're from.
Yeah.
And actually, this is the only place I feel like I'm from. And then even going to the Museum of Liverpool with the kids and everything. As a writer, then I was seeing, looking at the top floor of that, where they have the musicians and the footballers and the writers, and thinking, oh, there's the Frank Cottrell voices and the Jimmy McGoverns and the Willie Russells. And
they're doing what I want to do.
Yeah, exactly that. And the influences on me and all of that stuff in the 80s that they were all doing is the biggest influence on me as a writer. So, that's a long story for a short question.
It was fantastic. I really appreciate it. And You talked right at the start there about your love of Doctor Who, and then you've talked about your love of Anfield and Liverpool. You managed to bring those things together, and it's funny because I remember at the time when it happened, lots of people talking about it, and people going, "I wonder who's made that happen." Well, it was you.
Oh, it was me completely. Yeah. I was because of what I was just telling you about. Because I got to show run Doctor Who for like 3 seasons, and then it was my 3rd season. We were filming during the pandemic. We came and everything was shut down, but it enabled us to film. But I really wanted to. It was the same thing, really. I wanted to unite everything in that show, so I wanted it to be set in Liverpool in its season. It goes everywhere, but you sort of have a home base every season of where the series is set. I brought John Bishop into the show, and I was like, and then it's like, okay, I am definitely the only writer who will ever, in the 60-year, however long Doctor Who goes on for now as well, there will be no other writer who puts a Trent Alexander-Arnold joke into Doctor Who for the 7 people in the crossover of the Venn diagram of Doctor Who and football. But but also I it's one of those things for me where I could, I don't know, pay it back or whatever, where you go, this city is amazing, it looks amazing on camera. I always feel like it's not filmed enough in. And so we did a lot of filming, and I put a spaceship over Anfield, and I put we had aliens marching down outside your office, outside the Museum of Liverpool. Yeah. But I guess it was just it's like a way to say thank you, because it's knowing how you're formed. Because that moving about a lot as a kid, you just I don't really have any anchor, and then actually. I've learned that this is the place that is that, which isn't most people's relationship to it.
We're doing a terrible job of selling your book. It is called Death of the White Hart. It is out on the 27th of March. Is it the first thing of this type that you've done? Because obviously you've been involved a lot in sort of television and stuff like that. So this must have been quite a different experience for you. And so how did you find it all, and how pleased are you? Or have you got to the point where you don't even know if it's any good yet?
Definitely that. I mean, there's a lot.
I've done it for so long. Someone just tell me if it's good. Well, Marion Keyes says it's good. It's written here.
Yeah,
she's
Marion Keyes, and Lee Child, and your mate,
your mate Jilly.
It's weird it was coming out of Doctor Who. I really wanted to do something I hadn't done before, and so to move across and do a novel, I just wanted to. It feels like being a proper writer, writing a book, right? With TV, there's 100 people making it. You've got actors who are fronting it for you, and then with a book, I was like, I want to see whether I can do that. So, and I deliberately chose a murder mystery, it's a proper. I hope it's a proper page turning whodunit, all about sort of the death of the British pub. And it's was a very similar and completely different process writing it, because you've got all the things of story structure and character and all that kind of stuff, but actually the writing and being able to tell it from different points of view, all that kind of stuff was different and a challenge. But I loved it, and I'm doing another one next year, and it was really interesting to do. But hopefully it's mainly just it's a proper page turner. That was what I wanted to make.
Yeah, well, I can't wait to read it. Thanks so much for coming in to talk about it. Like I said, Death of the White Hart. Rob Gutman's got a pub called the White Hart as well, so there we are. So that's
can we do an event there, please, Rob?
We'll sort that out. We are running low on time. Can you come back?
Yeah, I'd love to.
We'll do more.
I feel like I've just spilled my emotional guts to you, and then that's...
Well, I'm asking for more, so here we are. and hearing about those aliens coming past the work, and I was wondering where Milo came from, and that was... and that's how he ended up here. Milo's sort of filming. Brilliant. Yeah, do come back and see us, Chris. We'll do a proper sit down, a proper cup of tea. But in the meantime, thanks so much for sharing your journey. Thanks so much for sharing your story. And I'm really looking forward to reading your book.
Brilliant. Thanks, John.
Great stuff from Chris there, and John as well. You did all right.
Yeah, I liked him. We're going to get him back in. Yeah, we're going to do a cup of tea because he's a dead interesting fella, and we got into quite a lot there that I think that he wasn't even necessarily expecting to talk about when we got in. But there's loads more. He wants to do an event in the White Hart pub as well. I told him Gutman's got a White Hart, and he was excited by that.
I just want to die.
It's a murder mystery.
I like that it's not about Gutman's pub. He's just got a heart that is white.
Yeah, okay. No, sounds fantastic. Let's do it. I'm all in. Excellent stuff. Someone should tell Rob. And we'll go from there. We'll make that happen. John, the other scenario is that all three stay. I think that massively... I think there's a lot of people who go great when they hear that. I think it's just worth saying that there are potential downsides to that. I think it massively solidifies Liverpool's wage bill, which again, people might say, well, it's not my money, but what the agency Liverpool do or don't have then moves around. There's a possibility, as I say, you did the thing with Dave Powell, Liverpool's wage bill might go above 400 million a year. People always want transfers, but Liverpool pay huge amounts in wages all the time. It would, even that scenario throws open tons of questions in terms of what it is they're going to do next.
It does, and it's interesting to me that, you know, we all paint different pictures of why certain players haven't signed. You know, for Trent, it's like always had his head turned by, you know, Real Madrid. For Virgil, it's, you know, maybe they're worried about his sort of legs and stuff like that. With Salah, it's probably more of a, you know, a money thing. But the fact is that none of them have signed at the moment, and they're all in an identical situation in terms of where they're sort of factually at. And I just wonder whether there's a little bit of they are just nervous about how much that wage bill can creep up, because, you know, I think they'll be looking at it from a point of view, all three of them will be looking at a point of view, well, I expect my next contract to be bigger, price of living, you know, all that sort of thing. Mo Salah's like, have you seen my lecky bill? I go, that Christmas tree doesn't light itself. And so he's in that sort of situation. And you know, Trent, you know, in terms of how his sort of career's going, Virgil's like, well, I'm captain now. I mean, all three of them can make, you know, decent arguments that they should be paid more, and the agents are probably doing that, or they won't be doing their job. And I think Liverpool would ideally like to sign at least two of them on a little bit less, and then overall maybe sort of end up breaking even. And so I think that's been the tricky thing for them to do, because if all three of them do sign, and listen, that's still my preference, because I just love them as footballers and I think that could, but if all three of them do sign, it'll probably cost us money. And then you're looking at a summer where, you know, there's going to be, I'm sure, plenty of bonuses, quite right, because they sort of won the league and stuff like that. And so they'll be in a situation where the wage bill will be higher. And then people like us, the likes of us, and we went off the worst for it, but we all join in, will then go, right, well, who are you buying? And any player who improves this Liverpool team, which is what we want to do, will be on decent money. And so they are going to have to be a little bit creative, I feel. And it's not quite sort of, you know, sell to buy and things like that, but it isn't just going to be this idea that you can run amok. That is the case in scenario one, because you've got all this wage bill, you know, there is room PSR-wise, you know, to spend money. I don't think PSR is an issue for a club like Liverpool in terms of spend. It is the wage bill and what you need to do.
It's cash flow.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think things will become a little bit tighter. That's not to say that I don't expect us to buy players, because we had the squad last summer and they wanted Zubimendi. And they thought they got him, and so
Caicedo before that as well.
Exactly. So they obviously felt like they had wiggle room in terms of the wages to sort of get him in. But I think it will be a case of, you know, replacing people rather than sort of adding to it. And now that there's good players who I think that the managers looked at and maybe sort of not quite sure about, you know, so, but you start to think, well, is it Chiesa who they look to sort of move on, who didn't come in on, you know, huge money, but is probably on decent sort of wages, you know, have we got sort of value out of him? You know, not necessarily his fault, but you'd say sort of probably not. Then you're looking at Darwin Núñez. Can you get a big chunk of money for him, which allows you to get a number 9 in? It allows you sort of invest in him. And Darwin is probably on sort of decent money. I'm sure Jota's contract is a fair.
Well, he's had a re-sign, Jota.
Yeah, exactly. So you're probably looking at one of them two moving on and trying to create some space. And then can you do something similar in midfield as well? You go back to someone like Gomez, who's probably on like a decent wage at the moment because he signed a few new deals. And so I think they would have to look at it. And as football fans, you know, you don't want to be sort of making those arguments because you're like, oh, come on, they've got loads of money, they just sort of spend it. But I think in this scenario where I would imagine what you're paying the three of them will have gone up, then, you know, there will be some wheeling and dealing they'll have to do, but I think that is possible, and ended up with a better squad for the manager to work with.
This is the choice of back to this idea of the 2027 thing. I think that you can make an argument. In every scenario, Liverpool's constant problem is, I think, that there's a feeling that Liverpool need to be pretty close to perfect in terms of the decisions they make, Craig, and the way they steer the ship. And when they're not, you feel the cost of it quite significantly. I think you can make an argument that trying to get to your best possible outlook for the start of the 2027 season just becomes a little trickier in this scenario. The flip side of that, though, is that you've got 3 magnificent footballers for the next 2 years in Salah and Van Dijk's case, and probably for the rest of his career in Trent Alexander-Arnold's case if he signs this deal, I think. Could be wrong. And that at least gives you that thing to build on in the meantime, that you're building on success and the cultural stuff that John talked about before.
Yeah, but the idea of having to be close to Perth, like, it has been something over the past sort of 7-8 years, and I completely understand that. But I actually would be going into this season not feeling like that would be the case. Like, I'm not looking around me and thinking that Arsenal might make a couple of signings, and I know we're talking 3 months early here, so it's more difficult. But we're seeing Man City in this sort of state of transition. They're not going to be at their perfect sort of selves. So if Liverpool are the team that are 12 points clear in the Premier League, and we know there are areas in which they can improve and we can make those improvements, it feels like Liverpool are set up to win again. I think all of this it's the cost of keeping versus the cost of losing them, and what helps us win now. Like, I know your point on the 2027 and all of that, but like, Liverpool are set up to win now because they're about to win the Premier League. And so, what helps us best win the Premier League next season, rather than waiting, we're going to have to start again, and then the idea is that we win the Premier League in 2027 with these new players, and it's and all of that.
I think that Schlott's business is win now, and Schlott's entire outlook is win now. Yeah. My argument is what I think Richard Hughes' job, when we talk about what is or isn't Richard Hughes' job, I think it's to get Liverpool through the next 3 seasons into the best possible position, if you see what I mean. Arne Schlott's attitude will be, lads, I want to win 100 games next season. I don't even care if there is 100 games. Put more games in and we're going to win 100 of them.
Maybe, but what Michael Edwards I'm losing my voice. What Michael Edwards has done really well when he was at Liverpool in the previous time was he's found these sweet spot players that are on relatively low wages, decent fees but low wages, and we've got them at the right time, and then they've become better, and we've been able to either sell them on for more or sell them on a decent wage, but we've won. And so I would back him to do that again, having kept the other 3.
Okay, excellent stuff. It's been the Anfield Wrap. Huge thank you to Podwave Studios in Perth, and everyone who came out to all the live shows all the way through Perth. 8 of them across 5 cities. They've been a pleasure to do all the way through. Everyone, the absolute business. So thank you very much if you managed to get out for that. I hope, and been checking in on the content all the way through. I tell you what, Gutman's been an absolute trooper. What a hero!
Yeah,
genuinely.
Give him Trent's wages.
Yeah. Give Gutman Sexton's wages.
Hey, come on.
Chopped Secco over there. That's the way in which it goes. No, he's been the absolute business all the way through. Huge thank you to Rob. All of that sort of stuff. As I say, everyone who came out, everyone who helped organise those shows and put them on. It's been an absolute pleasure. We're in Perth for approximately, I think it's about 18 more hours. Might even only be 16 more hours. We're going to go and have a nice time now. Huge thank you to Podwave Studios. As ever, our friends at Peloton. We're looking forward to getting back on the bike, getting back in the studio, and getting back on with Liverpool winning the Football League. It's the Anfield Wrap. See you later on.